"You're not family, so sit in the back," my sister whispered, blocking my seat at Mom's funeral. I froze as relatives stared. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and said my name. "I'm Danielle Harper. I'm 36 years old and I work as a medical billing specialist. Nothing fancy, just someone who handles responsibilities without making noise about it. For years, I paid small expenses for my mother's care. Pharmacy bills, doctor copays, the little things that add up. Meanwhile, my siblings controlled the major decisions, the big picture stuff they considered important. After my father remarried when I was 12, everything changed. I became the extra child, while my sister turned into the favorite. It became a pattern I couldn't escape. Holidays came and went without my invitation. Group chats existed that I wasn't added to. Financial decisions about Mom's care happened in conversations I wasn't part of. I'm not wealthy, I'm not glamorous. I live modestly in a small apartment, drive a sedan that's seen better days, and work long hours to make ends meet. But I stayed close to my mother. Through everything, I was there. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. My bond with Mom went deeper than anyone realized, built on quiet moments and honest conversations they never witnessed. If you've ever felt pushed aside in your own family, hit that subscribe button. Share your stories about being underestimated or excluded in the comments below. I'm building a community where quiet strength gets the recognition it deserves, where people who do the work without seeking applause can feel seen. Let's create that space together before I take you back to that funeral where everything was about to change. The funeral home smelled like lilies and furniture polish. Relatives whispered in clusters while my sister Elaine controlled everything. The seating chart, the program, even who could speak. She approached me near the front entrance, her face tight with something that looked like satisfaction. "You're not immediate family, Danielle," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "You should sit in the back." Heat flooded my face as guests turned to watch. Cousins I'd known my whole life suddenly found their shoes fascinating. I walked to the back row, each step feeling like a public declaration that I didn't belong. During the eulogy, Elaine stood at the podium and thanked those who truly stood by Mom during her final months. Her eyes swept the room, landing on everyone except me. I thought about all those late evenings I'd spent at Mom's bedside, the pharmacy runs at midnight, the bills I'd quietly handled when money was tight. None of it visible to the family members now nodding along to Elaine's performance. After the service ended, people gathered in small groups, sharing memories. Elaine announced a private family meeting about the estate in the side room. "Just immediate family," she said, looking directly at me. The message was clear. I wasn't invited. But then Mr. Alvarez, the family lawyer, walked straight toward me. His briefcase was old leather, worn at the corners. "Ms. Harper," he said clearly, "I need you to remain for the will reading." The room went quiet. Relatives exchanged confused glances. Elaine's confident expression faltered. Tension crackled through the air like static electricity. The side room had cream-colored walls and uncomfortable chairs. Family members filed in, Elaine taking the seat closest to Mr. Alvarez like she was claiming territory. Danielle was never really involved in caregiving. She had her own life, her own priorities. My cousin Emma nodded along. "That's true. Mom always said Elaine handled everything." I started to speak, but Elaine cut me off. "There's really no need to complicate this. The arrangements have been clear for years." Whispers spread among the mourners still filtering in. I could feel their judgment settling over me like dust. Then came the next blow. I don't think Danielle has any claim to personal items or the house, Elaine continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. She only showed up at the end, really. The cousin who'd driven in from Ohio repeated it louder. Yeah, only showed up at the end. My throat tightened, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned ago that showing emotion only gave them ammunition. Elaine pulled out a typed list from her purse, the paper crisp and clearly prepared in advance. I've already made preliminary divisions of Mom's belongings, she said, passing copies around, just to make things easier for everyone. I scanned the list. Mom's pearl necklace that I'd helped her pick out for her 60th birthday, listed as family heirloom, assigned to Elaine. The antique clock I'd had restored last year as a gift, family heirloom, assigned to Emma. The china set I'd bought piece by piece over 3 Christmases, family heirloom, assigned to Elaine's daughter. They'd erased my presence entirely, rewriting history with a printed document. But I stayed calm. I noticed the small inconsistencies, the dates that didn't align, the items described wrong. My composure seemed to unsettle Elaine. She grew more aggressive, her voice sharper. I think we can all agree this is the most logical division. Mr. Alvarez said nothing, just organized his documents with methodical precision. The tension in the room built like pressure before a storm. I remembered those late-night conversations with Mom. We'd sit in her kitchen, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator, and she'd talk about fairness and truth. People think fairness means equal, she'd said once, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. But fairness means honest. What they didn't know was Mom kept records of everything. Every conversation, every expense, every broken promise. I'd helped her organize medical files over the past 2 years, sorting receipts and correspondence into labeled folders. She'd been meticulous, almost obsessive about documentation. I remember her saying, "I need to know the truth is protected." At the time, I thought she meant for insurance purposes. Now I understood differently. Mom had watched Elaine handle her finances for years, and she'd grown suspicious. Small amounts that didn't add up, expenses that seemed inflated. She'd never confronted Elaine directly, but she'd started keeping her own records. 3 months before she died, she'd asked me to store a sealed envelope. "Don't open it unless you need to," she'd said, "but if things go the way I think they will, you'll know when." I'd tucked it away, thinking it was just another precaution. I had a plan they never saw coming, not because I'd orchestrated it, but because Mom had prepared for exactly this moment. She documented everything. Every receipt I'd paid, every visit I'd made, every time Elaine had promised to handle something and hadn't. The weight of that realization settled over me as I sat in that room full of people who'd written me off. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was my mother's final act of protection, her way of making sure the truth survived, even when she couldn't speak it herself. Mr. Alvarez had been the family lawyer for 30 years. He'd handled my parents' affairs through marriages, business deals, and bitter disputes. Unlike the others, he treated me with quiet respect, meeting my eyes when he spoke. "Miss Harper, a moment, please," he'd said before the reading began. We'd stepped into the hallway where the sound of the gathering was muffled. I handed him the sealed envelope and the organized receipts I'd brought. His weathered hands handled them carefully, like they contained something fragile. "I remember the disputes," he said softly, "the arguments about money, about who was owed what. He'd been there through all of it, the divorce, the remarriage, the slow shift in family dynamics that pushed me to the margins. He nodded slowly as he reviewed the documents, understanding clicking behind his eyes. "Trust the process, Miss Harper. Your mother was very thorough." Back in the room, Elaine's confidence had grown into something almost triumphant. She discussed selling the house with Emma, debating whether spring or summer would bring better offers. "We could easily get above asking in this market," she said. They talked about Mom's belongings like inventory, the furniture, the jewelry, the paintings she'd collected over decades. All of it reduced to estimated values and division strategies. I remained silent, letting them build their castle of assumptions. Mr. Alvarez organized his papers with deliberate care, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. He knew what was coming. So did I. The arrogance in the room grew thicker. They'd already decided how this would end. Mr. Alvarez opened his briefcase in the lawyer's office. The space smelled like old paper and leather. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Elaine sat forward, a small smile playing at her lips. She expected vindication. "I'll begin with the primary will," Mr. Alvarez said, his voice even and professional. He read the first section, equal distribution of liquid assets among surviving children, standard language about property and possessions. Elaine's smile widened. Then she interrupted. "I'd like to note for the record that Danielle's lack of involvement in Mom's care should be considered. She really shouldn't receive anything given how absent she was." The room went still. Mr. Alvarez looked at her over his reading glasses. "Mrs. Patterson, I have documentation here that tells a different story." He produced a folder, setting it on the desk with a soft thump. Inside were receipts, logs of visits, time-stamped records of medical appointments I'd attended, pharmacy bills with my signature, and then a handwritten letter from my mother, dated 3 months before her death, detailing everything, describing my care, praising my dedication, expressing disappointment in how I'd been treated. I pulled out the sealed envelope and handed it across the desk. Mr. Alvarez opened it carefully. Inside were financial records, bank statements, checks made out to Elaine that didn't match reported expenses, receipts showing money diverted from Mom's care account. The evidence was methodical, damning, complete. Gasps filled the office. Elaine's face went pale. Relatives shifted in their seats, suddenly uncomfortable with their earlier assumptions. "Based on this documentation and evidence of financial misconduct, your mother executed a second addendum to her will. Due to breach of fiduciary duty, Elaine Patterson is removed as executor." Elaine's mouth opened. No sound came out. "The addendum names Danielle Harper as executor, with full authority over the estate and its distribution." My hands stayed folded in my lap, calm, steady, exactly where they needed to be. Elaine found her voice. "This is ridiculous. You can't just believe some papers and receipts." But Mr. Alvarez had decades of documentation, legal language, signatures, witnesses. It was undeniable. The power in that room shifted like a physical weight, moving from one side to the other. I oversaw the estate distribution exactly as Mom had wished, not with vindictiveness, but with fairness, the real kind of fairness Mom had talked about in her kitchen. Each item went to the person she actually intended to have it. The necklace went to Emma, because Mom had promised it to her years ago. The clock stayed in the family home that I decided not to sell. I chose not to pursue legal action against Elaine for the diverted funds. That wasn't what Mom would have wanted. But I established boundaries, clear ones, written ones. Elaine faced consequences anyway. The family's trust evaporated once the truth came out. Phone calls went unreturned. Invitations stopped coming. I visited Mom's grave on a quiet Tuesday morning. The grass was wet with dew and birds sang in the oak tree nearby. I told her, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me when others chose blindness. Thank you for protecting the truth." Standing there, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Dignity, belonging, the restoration of something I thought was lost forever. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand, solid and unshakable, when everything else falls away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the extra child. I was exactly where I belonged. If you've been pushed aside during family loss or had your role erased in estate disputes, drop your story below. You're not alone in this. So many of us have fought to be recognized after being overlooked for years. Let's talk about fairness, about being seen, about getting the acknowledgement we deserved all along. This community is here to support you through it. Click that subscribe button and hit the hype notification so this story reaches others who need to hear it. Your story has power, whether it's about family, betrayal, or finding your voice when everyone tried to silence it. Sharing helps someone else feel less alone. Drop your experience in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Every story's here matters, including yours. Thanks for being here, for listening, and for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next one.